Morning, and it's another great Jackie moment. Sharing another video with you. What we want to talk about, as I say, mentoring the dyslexic. So what we're going to be talking about at the moment is all about the prison. So each video we're making is talking a little bit about how the project went on. This little video that I'm making today is all about the second part of the project. We had been in prison for 6 months, as I said in the last video. The funding had run out, so I had 3 months voluntary work. And this is where I started to look at how else I could help these men. Now, what you've got to remember is I had been sitting there now, more or less, I'd been interviewed for over a year. So what I wanted to look at was what was this research showing me. So I'm going to read from this book because I want to make sure my figures are correct, and so I would like to share with you. So Mentoring for You started in January 2007. Now we had already been doing research now for a year, and what we'd found, right, is that we interviewed 1,200 prisoners, and we had found that 53% of them had dyslexic characters. And we wanted to sort of ask them about their lives, what had happened to them, and also this was going to help me how to take this project forward, what ideas that I could work with to help these prisoners. So let's sort of start. We had 575 of them had no qualifications. 674 was expelled from school. 742 had failed their driving test. Now remember, this is a dyslexic man, and if he's failing, and which is what a lot of these men were telling me, that they'd gone for the test, they'd paid the money, they'd failed. So what did they do? They, in the end, drove the car without a driving licence, without insurance, and this is why a lot of them had keep going back into prison through, that was their crime of taking and driving a car. We also had 590 men who told me they were self-employed. Now again, when I started digging deeper and asking more questions, of course they wasn't self-employed, there was actually all cash in hand, because they couldn't fill out the forms, wouldn't go to the job centre, wouldn't go to Inland Revenue, they wouldn't talk about the fact that they couldn't read and write, so all their jobs was all cash in hand. Now also what I did, I asked, it was 450 men, and they'd all worked on building sites, and to be on a building site you had to have this CSCS card. Now this was all about health and safety. I had been teaching this qualification back in 2004. I had learned that this was what was going to happen on the building sites, so all our youngsters needed to have this qualification to be able to go on to a building site. And as I say, 450 of the prisoners I asked, you know, had they done this CSS card, and only 50 had admitted they had. Again, what was being told is that the prisoners would go to these officers, try to pass this qualification because they needed it, but of course being dyslexic, didn't always understand, really frightened of computers, so they didn't rush into these type of jobs. So again, you can imagine they go on a building site, didn't have this qualification, no job. So we've actually got sort of like 3 things here, very, very important to why these men wasn't keeping jobs. So as I say, failed driving tests, so they took their own cars, being self-employed, and again they told me all cash in hand, and now we had that these men was on building sites who couldn't get on because they hadn't passed the CSCS card. So now what I did, I actually asked, now we had non-dyslexic and dyslexic prisoners, and I asked 124 and non-dyslexic and 124 dyslexic, and the non-dyslexics were coming in the prison 1.3 times So they were coming in and coming in. But the dyslexic man was coming in between 4 to 7 times. This was mad. This was ridiculous. I was so shocked. How is this happening in this time and age that these men, why hadn't anybody just sat and spoke to them and to see actually what was going on? Now, what I then asked was, I found, as I was asking all these questions, 10 prisoners had been in over 40 times. Why had these men been in prison so many times? And why hadn't somebody sat and said, okay, 3 or 4, fine, why more? What is the root of the problem? And this really was what I was trying to sort of find out, was what is their root of their problem? Now, what is going on for them that they're having such a problem?